Welcome to The Great Podcast, a show where we take a look at the important men and women of history and decide once and for all if they are worth all the fuss. I'm Jordan.
And my name's David. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Jordan, I don't think you realize this.
No.
This is episode 10. Look at us. We got to number 10.
We did it.
Yay!
We got there eventually.
Feel happy for us,
Made it
listeners.
happen.
All right. So, I'm going to hand you this. This is your list of the children of Marcus Aurelius and Faustina from last week.
Yeah.
And I even provided you something on which to write this time. So, you're welcome. We're really moving up in the world.
Pretty sure it's the same thing I had last time.
You didn't have a notebook last time. I pulled that specifically out of my drawer for you.
All right, well.
Yep. Now, imagine if you will. Wow, that was probably very loud.
Close to me and still use this notebook.
There you go.
You've
All right.
provided.
Okay. Are you ready, sir?
Never.
Imagine, if you will, the Colosseum, packed to the brim with the people of Rome. The crowd were in an uproar and seemed limitless in their bloodlust. Hundreds of animals had been killed, and in increasingly inventive ways already, but they wanted more. A man was guided into the center of the arena, where a pole with chains awaited him. He did not struggle as the guards chained him to the pole. He had a defeated look in his eye. Another man stepped onto a platform nearby, and a great cheer went up as the man waved to the crowd. He held a javelin in his hand. The condemned man did not acknowledge the crowd nor this newcomer. He continued to look down at his sandy sandals. Shut up. Painting a picture here. He looked up, however, when the gates opened at the edge of the arena. Out stepped a leopard.
Oh.
Too skinny and clearly furious at its mistreatment.
There you go.
In the blink of an eye, the beast dashed across the sand. Now the man felt a new pang of fear. This savage beast would provide a horrific death, and likely not a fast one. The crowd held its breath as the leopard crossed the distance. It was only a matter of seconds, but it felt like much more, especially to the condemned man. And then the cat leapt. It was mere feet from latching its murderous jaws around the soft neck of the man, when the javelin took the beast in the heart as it flew through the air.
What a shot.
The animal flopped onto the sand at the condemned man's feet. A trickle of urine joined the blood as the man released his bladder.
Yeah.
After a short pause, the crowd went crazy. And that's our intro.
Wow.
Yeah. Good times. Good times had by all. Except maybe the leopard and that guy.
I don't know. Like, I didn't die at that moment.
Yes, yes. Okay. So, before we actually get into the thick of this, my usual note on sources. As discussed last time, this week we are going to look at Commodus, the son of Marcus Aurelius. Our old friend Cassius Dio was alive and in the Senate during Commodus's reign. However, we don't have all the pieces of his story from Dio, which is unfortunate. And despite Commodus's impact and importance, he's a pretty important person, we have very little detail on a lot of stuff. However, we also have a new source that I was very excited to share with you.
Yes.
Yes, I bought the books by this man called Herodian. He is an enigma. We know almost nothing about him, other than that he was around during Commodus's reign and wrote about all the emperors of his lifetime. And he was clearly involved in the state in some capacity because he was writing about all these people. But we don't know who he was, where he was from. Might have been Egyptian. We don't know.
Interesting.
And yet we have this very beautiful book, which has really fun writing, which compared to the Historia Augusta, which is just all over the place, was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. It's like, whoa, it's in chronological order. I can follow this. Wild.
Just insane. Now,
Who would have thought?
With multiple firsthand sources, huge gaps in the historical record, we have a lot of stories, and they usually don't agree with each other. So as always, I'm going to be crafting a narrative that is fun and follows the truth as close as we can determine it to be. So, quick recap. Last time, we saw Antoninus Pius take over after Hadrian. He ruled for over 2 decades, with Marcus Aurelius as his heir and second in command. After the longest peaceful reign in Roman history, Pius died, and Marcus began his own reign.
Begrudgingly.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, fine, I will. He also declared that he would rule alongside his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus.
The co-rulers.
Immediately, a massive flood hit, and the Parthians invaded Armenia. By this point, Marcus had had and lost several children. Still, he kept a stiff upper lip. He sent Verus out to the east to lead the war, Well, Marcus ran the war from Rome through his brother. Varus returned almost 5 years later from the east, and not a moment too soon, because the Marcomanni and many other German tribes began to assault the empire. This time, Marcus and Varus both moved to the front. They did well, but pretty early on, Varus died, possibly of the plague, which was brought back by the soldiers coming back from the Parthian War. This left multiple wars and a plague-addled empire solely in Marcus's hands. If not for his stoic beliefs, he may not have been able to handle this, as we saw, because, man, they didn't stop on this man. For 14 years, Marcus fought the barbarians. He was hardly in Rome for a majority of his reign. He was also losing children and other loved ones at a crazy rate.
Yeah, wild.
Finally, in 180 CE, it looked like the plague was subsiding and the wars were coming to a close. Then Marcus died, possibly of the plague as well, and he left the empire to his last surviving son, the 19-year-old Commodus.
We all know this goes really well.
We got some foreboding messaging last time near the end about how his one great was keeping Commodus as his heir. So let's take a look, shall we? Commodus was born August 31st, 161 CE. This was very shortly into his father's reign. Now, this means he is the very first Roman emperor to be, quote, born in the purple, which means born to a father who is currently the emperor.
Right.
And then
an actual royal family.
Correct. As a reminder, his mother was Faustina, daughter of Antoninus Pius, the woman who birthed around 14 children, the list of which you have in your hands. Now, how many of them are alive by the end of our Marcus time?
7 still.
Including Commodus.
That's
okay,
right.
Cool.
That's right. She's batting 50%. That's right. It's pretty good.
As we saw last time, Commodus was the younger of twin brothers.
Yep.
Titus was the other boy's name. Aeneas was born the following year. As was a trend with Marcus's children, Titus did not survive very long. He died in 165 CE, somewhere around 4 years old. So Commodus may or may not really have even had memories of his twin brother. By this point, Marcus's only surviving sons were Commodus and Aeneas, and both were still very young, 3 and 4. In 166 CE, Marcus announced both boys as his joint heirs. Both were granted the title of Caesar, as was the custom, though it is likely both were still far too young to understand the gravity of this situation. Commodus was often sick as a child, something which likely gave his parents a lot of panic attacks.
I'm sure, after having half your children die.
He's gonna die!
Yeah, right? Like the rest
Call
of them.
Galen! Galen, you'll remember, was the imperial physician who often cared for Commodus and wrote the wonderful details about the plague.
Oh, yes. That's right.
Great guy, Galen. He saw personally to Commodus's frequent ailments as well as the other children. As one might expect for the children of such an educated man, Commodus was tutored by the greatest minds of the age. A quote from the Historia Augusta, Marcus tried to educate Commodus both by his own precepts and by those of great and excellent men. The boy would be growing up in a world of great misery and uncertainty, however. Many of his siblings and his uncle Varus had died. Aeneas was one of them. He died in 169 CE while getting a tumor surgically removed from below his ear.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, poor kid. I can't even imagine. And by this point, Commodus likely would be fully aware that his little brother just died because he would have been around
probably a little
8 years old.
traumatizing.
Yeah. And on top of that, thousands upon thousands of people were dying in the city from the plague.
Yeah, just growing up in a literal hell on earth.
Correct. Meanwhile, his father was away most of the time dealing with the very real threat of barbarians getting into Italy. Perhaps because of all of this misery, Commodus seemed a bit off, one could say. Again, the Historia Augusta. From his earliest boyhood, he was base, shameless, cruel, lecherous, defiled of mouth too, and debauched. It also provides an example. When Commodus was 12, he took a bath. This is something he really enjoyed and would continue to love throughout his life. However, yes, baths.
I mean,
quite
I
a luxury. Not
Yeah.
a lot of people got more than the public bathhouses.
Yeah, I
which
suppose
were
so.
Probably
Yeah.
kind of gross.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah. So this little prince really likes his baths. And this bath was just a bit not warm enough
Oh, no.
for Commodus.
Someone's probably going to die from that.
So he ordered the slave who had drawn his water be thrown into the furnace.
Yeah.
Show him what hot in
That's
hot bath
right.
means.
Get him out of here.
The man given this order threw a sheepskin into the furnace to simulate the smell of burning flesh, which was enough to satiate the boy.
God.
Though I think a firm no might have been a better option.
It may be.
With so much going on, and Commodus not behaving the best, Marcus had a brilliant idea. He would bring his only son and heir to the front with him. There, he could teach his boy the ways of leading men. Mm-hmm. This might not be a terrible idea if there was some...
Sounds like a pretty good idea, honestly.
Yeah. Well, if there was some guarantee of safety for him, but I suppose in these times there wasn't anywhere that was safe.
Same guarantee of safety as the emperor. So,
You are correct.
Yeah.
Fair. Marcus also might have had the same hopes he'd had when sending Varus to the Parthian War. Maybe a little warfare would straighten him up a bit. In 172 CE, Commodus was at the military HQ with his father. After a great victory, Marcus took the title of Germanicus. And he gave the title to his son as well, presenting him before the army as he did so. The 11-year-old was a conqueror of Germany. In 175 CE, Avidius Cassius heard rumors of Marcus's death and so declared himself emperor. You remember that?
Yeah. The guy in the
yeah,
east,
he's
he's like, oh, he's dead. Well, I guess that's me now.
Oh, he's not dead?
That's unfortunate.
Shucks.
Yeah.
He may or may not have been influenced to do this by Empress Faustina. The theory being that Marcus was ill and Commodus too young to assume power. So ask a powerful general to take the role and protect her family.
Right.
But Marcus was not dead. He soon recovered and announced he would be heading to Egypt to put down the revolt. But Cassius was quickly murdered by his men, fearing the might of Marcus coming down upon them. Faustina died shortly after this uprising, sending Marcus into great sorrow. It is unclear what Commodus's relationship with his mother was like. It seems pretty likely that her death would have been a great tragedy to the 14-year-old. However, Marcus took the opportunity to tour the east of the empire with his son in tow, just to make sure everyone was in line. Along the way, they stopped in Athens and were initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries.
Right.
They enjoyed a few months of traveling around and not dealing with barbarian warfare. That must have been nice.
Nice little break.
Except they couldn't escape the plague.
Yeah.
This tour would have shown the scope of the devastation the empire had endured for the last decade. Perhaps it was seeing how broken everything was that caused Marcus to make his next major decision. On November 27th, 176 CE, Marcus declared Commodus joint emperor. No longer Caesar, but Augustus.
Oh, boy.
This was followed by a joint triumph for the two emperors, and in January of 177 CE, the 15-year-old was made consul, the youngest ever to that point. The usual age, I think I've mentioned, was 30.
Right. Yeah. And honestly, you're looking at this and you're like, not a bad idea. You're really getting him involved. He's going to learn things. And when he takes over, he'll be good to go.
Wow, that is a really good summation of my next line.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so Marcus was clearly trying to put Commodus in the best position he could be in to inherit the throne.
Right.
The boy would need the support of both the military and the Senate to safely assume power. So put him out in front of everyone. Go, here's my heir. Scratch that. Here's my co-emperor.
Right.
He's great. He's just like me. Love him. Protect him. Teach him. And, I'm sure it won't be a problem that, Commodus hasn't actually done anything to earn all the praise that he's been getting, or the titles, or the ranks. I'm sure that won't have any long-term impacts.
It never goes to the head of a young, all-powerful person.
Nope. Can't imagine why it would.
I don't know how it would go bad.
In 178 CE, Commodus married the 14-year-old Crispina. He would have been around 18.
Crispina.
17, something like that.
Yeah,
With her
okay.
came a large dowry of land in southern Italy.
Nice.
This would ensure the finances of the future sole ruler, even though Commodus would already be filthy rich when Marcus died. Again, this probably would have no effect on him at all. After these few years of a little less misery and death, Marcus hauled Commodus back to the Danube front in 178 CE. By this time, Marcus was likely truly seeing how poor a fit his son would be as emperor. The boy was spoiled and erratic. He obeyed his father, but what happened when his dad wasn't around?
Yeah.
On the front, Commodus spent the next couple years watching as his father's armies defeated tribe after tribe. By 180 CE, it looked like the Romans were on the precipice of complete victory. The intention was to add 2 new provinces to the empire, with the conquered German lands. With them, at that time, would have been Marcus's daughter, Lucilla, the oldest one on that list that you got there in your hand.
Yeah. Number 4 that was born.
She had been the 11-year-old who was betrothed to Varus, her uncle,
Yes.
by adoption. She was all grown up now and was visiting her husband, Pompeianus, who was supreme commander of the war. In early March of 180 CE, Marcus became very ill. He summoned the leading men of his military and political administration. Commodus sat beside him as Marcus spoke to the men. And this will be a wonderfully long quote from Herodian. That you are distressed to see me in this condition is hardly surprising. It is natural for men to pity the sufferings of their fellow men, and the misfortunes that occur before their very eyes arouse even greater compassion. Here is my son, whom you yourselves have educated, approaching the prime of youth and, as it were, in need of pilots for the stormy seas ahead. I fear that he, tossed to and fro by his lack of knowledge in what he needs to know, may be dashed to pieces on the rocks of evil practices. When a man holds absolute power, it is difficult for him to control his desires. But if you give my son proper advice in such matters and constantly remind him of what he has heard here, you will make him the best of emperors, for yourselves and for all. And you will be paying the greatest tribute to my memory. Only in this way can you make my memory immortal. He probably didn't actually say that, but sure sounds cool.
Yeah, right. So the last ditch, like, hey, please.
Please. Okay, guys.
Just show him, teach him.
Look after him. Commodus is sitting right next to me.
Right.
Guys, look after him. He just pulls him in close. He's not ready.
Yeah.
Take care of Commodus.
That's right.
Then on March 17th, 180 CE, Marcus Aurelius died. He was a sickly man, particularly in his later years. He had discussed his plans with his leading generals and his son. Push in, finish the war. And then he whispered on the side, and keep Commodus in check.
Yeah, right. Control him.
But Commodus was now the sole ruler.
That's right. He said, I don't care what he said. I'm in charge.
So, Commodus set about coordinating his father's funeral. The empire mourned the loss of their beloved emperor, obviously. He had been completely or partially ruling for around 40 years by this point. The advisors Marcus left advised the new emperor that he should probably go visit the troops. And don't forget to pay them, since it's tradition and all. Fortunately, Commodus listened. He then spoke before those assembled for the funeral and said this: I am fully persuaded that you share in my grief over what has occurred, and that you are no less distressed by it than I. My father took greater delight in calling me fellow soldier than in calling me son, for he considered the latter a title bestowed by nature, the former a partnership based on excellence. Assuredly, my father has gone up to heaven, where he is already companion and counselor of the gods. But it is our task to devote ourselves to human affairs and to the administration of earthly matters. Pretty good speech.
Okay, yeah.
Pretty good speech
right.
that he also probably didn't give. But, Herodian may have been there for this. So, for a while after this, Commodus was indeed kept in check by his advisors. They helped guide the young man through the difficult task of being emperor and leading a war. And this worked pretty well. It seemed like the spoiled young lad was also quite malleable, however, naive and easily duped, which works great when you have solid men running the show in the shadows.
Right.
But then the whispers began.
Oh,
Those
boy.
with high ambition and low moral fiber began talking to Commodus. They talked about how miserable it was out on the front. Like, what a shame it was that Commodus was wasting his youth fighting wars just because his daddy said so.
That's right. You could come back and party.
Yeah. Hadn't he given enough of his years to this damned war? I'm going to, one last major quote from Herodian. I know I've had a few here in the beginning, but this is when I first started reading him, and he's so good. But, quote, all the sycophants at his table, men who gauge their pleasure by their bellies and something a little lower, kept reminding him of the gay life at Rome, describing the delightful spectacles and musical shows, and cataloging the abundance of luxuries available there. Commodus was soon filled with a longing to go and enjoy life. He was spoiled, sure, but he had been on the front for close to 7 years.
It's true. He's been out there for a minute.
Life had been mostly death and misery to this point. So, he called his generals to a council. There, he declared his wish to return to Rome. He did not tell the men he wanted to go party, like it was the days of
Obviously.
Nero, but instead he said he feared a usurpation by a powerful man sitting around in the capital while the emperor was busy at war. It was Lucilla's husband, Pompeianus, who spoke against Commodus leaving the front. It was another long and flowery speech that I have boiled down to be less Herodian. Look, kid, we're all tired and hungry, but we need to finish this war.
That's right. It's your duty.
It
All
is
right?
what your father wanted, and we're just too close to stop now. Plus, Marcus had a very secure reign, and you were the obvious heir. We should be fine not rushing back to Rome. And don't forget, finishing the conquest of 2 new provinces would look really good in your triumph.
Right.
Commodus was ashamed after being essentially reprimanded before his war
It's like,
council.
oh, man, he's right.
Yeah, he dismissed his council to think on the matters further. And he never called the council again.
He just went to Rome anyways.
Well, not quite.
Okay, good.
Not off the bat. Not off the bat.
Good.
Instead, Commodus began talking to those who agreed with him.
Ah, there you go.
Sycophants and all.
Right.
The ones that Herodian mentioned, they said things that made Commodus happy and excited. The
He
general
told him
said
what he wanted to hear.
Yeah,
What's wrong with that?
the general said things that made him feel small and embarrassed. Commodus sent word to the troops along the frontier. Hold the fort. Your emperor is traveling home.
Ugh.
Against the wishes of basically everyone, Commodus signed peace treaties with almost all the tribes. Those tribes who were losing handily.
And they're probably going to rebuild and come back.
Well, they suddenly found themselves being offered large sums of money for the war to end. They likely could not have believed their luck.
My God.
And with that, Commodus set off back to Rome.
What a great decision.
Yeah, it's great. While this move sent the military into chaos for a short bit, the people of Rome were ecstatic when they heard that the new emperor was returning to the capital. Every person alive had lived under one of the 4 good emperors, at least one. The son of Marcus, their beloved ruler for 2 decades, and grandson of Antoninus Pius, was surely to pick up right where his father had left off.
Has to be.
People poured out of the city at his approach. Men and women wanted to be the first to behold their new sovereign, and he was a sight to behold. For those who have seen the thumbnails with the emperor's faces that I put up, you will know that Marcus was a pretty handsome man, and Antoninus Pius, pretty handsome man, and Faustina, who you wouldn't have seen, also a very attractive woman. So Commodus was a striking youth with a very athletic build and charming good looks. Apparently very striking eyes. It is curious that in Herodian's telling of this instance of him returning to Rome, there is nothing mentioned about the freedman Seodorus. The Historia Augusta claims that Commodus rode into the city in his chariots, and he was with the former slave. Not only were they riding together, which was absurd, but Commodus openly kissed him as they rolled through the crowds.
Oh my God.
This period, as I mentioned, very muddy. Sources are incomplete and disagree with each other, so we will just make do. In our tale, we will keep Seodorus, the freedman who rode into Rome with his new emperor. Celebrations were held, obviously, games, races, and of course, gladiatorial combat.
Right. Naturally.
Marcus had stamped down on the blood sport. His son would do the opposite.
He likes it.
No. He loved gladiators. Like little kid playing with dinosaurs kind of loved gladiators.
Who doesn't love watching a bunch of bloodshed?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Apparently Marcus, but he's just weird.
Yeah, he's weird.
But the fun could not last forever. It was time to get to the business of ruling the empire. For the first couple of months, Commodus listened to the experienced advisors he'd inherited from his father. Like on the frontier, though, he soon grew dissatisfied. See, they just wanted him to do stuff.
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah,
like
it's
things
wild.
that weren't even fun or exciting.
Right. Bureaucracy and stuff.
Right. You know who was fun? Seodorus.
That's right. I can go party with him.
Yeah, because see, like when Commodus would seek his counsel, he would say things like, "Oh, I'll take care of that for you, Emperor. Don't trouble yourself. Hey, why don't you just head off to the brothel and I'll take care of that for you?"
Yeah.
Commodus was much preferred this to
Right.
the work that he was
Right.
being asked
No
to do.
one would obviously try to take advantage of me when they're just telling me things I want to hear.
It's not even possible. Seodorus is a great guy.
For sure.
So soon, Seodorus was all but running the empire. A former slave was the closest person to the emperor, And by the Historia Augusta's reckoning, he was sleeping with the emperor as well.
Yeah, maybe.
The Senate was incensed. The leading men left by Marcus to advise Commodus were slowly pushed out, and Theodorus built an administration around himself. Over the next couple of years, this was the state of things. Commodus indulged in the imperial lifestyle, while Theodorus administered the empire. It is hard to know for sure, but it seems that things were going decently well, all things considered. There was a bit of corruption, but nothing too out of control. Meanwhile, the Senate and other leading officials of the city grew more and more frustrated. The 20 years of struggle were at an end, and they were plagued once again, but this time by an emperor who seemed not to care.
Oh, yeah, he was very much over responsibility.
Yeah.
He's like, nah, it's okay. I'm going to have fun instead.
Now, there was one person who was particularly upset by the turn of events that had happened over the last couple of years, and that was Commodus' oldest sister, Lucilla.
Yeah.
Lucilla, as we have discussed, had once been Augusta, the empress. This was an official title which made her the most important woman in the empire because she was married to Varus.
Right.
Even if it didn't give her any actual authority over the state or anything, it was basically the most important woman you could be. Once Varus had died, and then Commodus had married Crispina, that title went to her. And Lucilla was not pleased by this, nor was she pleased by the bitchy way in which this teenage brat spoke to her. Because remember, she's a bit older. She's like double the age of Crispina. On top of this, Lucilla was coming to a dark realization. Commodus was not fit for rule. Their father had been one of the hardest working men she had ever known, and he had barely held everything together. Commodus hardly worked at all, and his freedman Chamberlain was doing all the work. After nearly 2 years of this unusual government, Lucilla decided it was time to act. She surrounded herself with men who could get the job done. Once the deed was completed, she and her husband, Pompeianus, would ascend to the purple. Her husband was a distinguished military leader under Marcus, after all.
Right.
As we will find out, her husband probably didn't know about this plot.
Yeah, he seems like a pretty loyal fellow.
He was.
Yeah.
As assassination plots go, this one was fairly simple. Pompeianus' nephew, Quintianus, volunteered to carry out the deed. The young man would wait near the entrance to the Colosseum, and as the emperor approached, he would step out, blocking the way. Then he'd stab the emperor with a concealed dagger as many times as he could. Now, if by some miracle the guards have not murdered him by this point,
Right.
he would flee and return to the rendezvous point.
Yeah, okay.
Probably be fine, I'm sure.
Yeah.
How do you think that played out?
I don't think it happened very well. I don't know. He either stabbed him a couple times and then died, and then Commodus survived, or the dagger was found immediately and he just got killed before he could even like get in position.
It's even better. Okay, I'll let Chris Scar finish the tale. Quote, Quintianus rushed from his hiding place, brandishing the dagger. But rather than stabbing the emperor at once, he wasted time crying, "See, this is what the Senate has sent you." Now, I'm not saying I dislike a good show.
Right.
But one would imagine that if you wanted to murder someone surrounded by armed guards,
Right.
you wouldn't take the time to pontificate before you start the stabbing portion of the night's events.
Yeah, just like in every anime where you're like, I'm gonna yell at my attack and then I'm gonna attack you. And
For
like,
about 3 minutes.
Like, oh, okay, I'm gonna block. I don't know how to count it. I'm gonna block that now. You could have just done it. It would have hurt a lot, but you told me about
what
it.
if this is just the abridged version and he actually like had a full speech and he like came out ready and only made it through this part and then just
And they're like, that's enough, man.
Yeah, they just caught him.
He's just like, guys, stab him.
stab him, get him, stab him down. They're like, oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Guards rush forward. So not only did he obviously get captured, but he kind of gave away that this was a
Everything.
deeper conspiracy by yelling about the Senate,
Right.
which didn't go over well.
Yeah, just openly talking about assassination plot within the government. It's great.
Now, what's even better for Commodus is this man was a squealer.
Yes.
Even before the torture began.
I can imagine.
Yeah. He was he's that guy from the second season of Alone who was so gung-ho and then left in like 12 hours.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm going to go kill the emperor. It's going to be so great. I've got this speech that I've been writing for 2 days now. It's going to be wonderful.
They're like, what do you mean speech?
What are you talking?
That's not.
What do you?
No. Just stab him.
Just stab him. No. Okay, fine. But it'll be fine.
Yeah, right.
So before the torture began, he gave up all the names
Yeah.
that he knew of.
Yeah, I bet.
After the list was complete, he was thoroughly tortured and executed, along with the other people who were involved. There was another man actually involved in the attempted stabbing who also stood there well.
You just waited.
Yep,
that's
just like
good.
No, my friend's giving a speech.
It'd be impolite.
Yeah, right.
To try
It
to
would be
stab him
very
right now.
impolite to like step forward, like he was in the middle of something. It is also likely that Lucilla would have been a prime suspect regardless. Her husband's nephew held the dagger, after all.
Oh, well.
Her Lucilla and her daughter from her first marriage were exiled to the island of Capri.
Ah.
Do you remember that place?
I
Does that ring a
do.
bell? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you recall what it was?
A long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
I mean, I just remember another woman being exiled there.
Correct. And Tiberius lived there with his sex palace.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah,
Caligula.
That's right.
Correct. Yep. To sum up Lucilla's position, a quote from A Dark History by Michael Kerrigan. Not for the first time, or the last, in conspiratorial history, a strong woman was let down by inadequate male assistance, which I found quite
funny.
Quite funny and very accurate. But hey, at least the women weren't executed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until a year later.
Yeah.
when a centurion was sent to the island to tie up loose ends.
That's right.
Seems Commodus just didn't want the public to see him execute a former empress and his sister.
Well, I mean, that's politically smart.
Correct. Now, Papianus avoided suspicion as he was quite loyal to Commodus at this time. After all, he was the son of the great Marcus Aurelius and my given heir and now emperor. What else am I going to do? Instead of execution, Papianus retired to the countryside. When asked to return to his seat in the Senate, he declined, citing an ailment of the eyes. Lucky bastard, frankly. Lucilla had also been accused of sleeping with both of her assailants, who were also her cousins. So maybe he was just happy to be done with the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm sure he was just like, listen, I've been fighting for so many years.
Can I go to bed?
I'm tired.
Can I
I'm gonna go
down?
chill. I'm
My
gonna
eyes
chill
hurt.
in the countryside, drink wine, and relax.
Seems like this shit's about to get not pleasant again.
Right.
So I'm gonna just go. Now here's the kicker though. One of the Praetorian prefects had been in on the plot as well.
Oh boy.
This man was Paternus. Now, the reason I actually handed you that piece of paper today is we need to start keeping track.
Oh, well.
There are two important positions that I want you to write down. So can you write down Chamberlain?
Maybe.
And then give yourself enough space to write some names. And then below that, prefects, because there will be several that we need to discuss today.
What do you mean room for names? What are we talking about here?
We're talking about less than 10 names.
So under the prefix title, is Chamberlain separate?
Chamberlain and prefects are separate.
But there's going to be multiple names under both of them.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Great. So we have Paternus, which is just like paternal, but with a U.S. And he had been a proven military man under Marcus Aurelius, so much so that he had risen up to become the prefect and then got an advancement to the senatorial class. Really impressive stuff. After all the advancement, he was seeing the work Marcus had done come crashing down and sought to put an end to it. Or maybe not. This is the story we get from the Historia Augusta, but Dio claims that Paternus was not involved at all. And we will get to a point, but Herodian doesn't mention Paternus, so we'll discuss that in a minute. But we'll say that he was involved and that he evaded suspicion. All the executions and exiles sorted, Commodus took a deep breath and then started shaking a little bit. He was deeply unnerved by this attempt on his life.
Well, I guess most people get a little unnerved when an assassination attempt happens.
Mm-hmm. Particularly when you're a little bit of an egomaniac.
Yeah,
and
you probably think you can't die a little bit.
I could not die.
Yeah.
Yes, especially when you're a young, athletic emperor. Like, yeah, to see like, oh, he could have stabbed me.
Right.
And there was a lot of people close to me who were involved. In the chaos of all this, several big players made their moves. And under Chamberlain, you can put Seatorus. Saoterus. So he's the Chamberlain.
Chamberlain, okay.
Yeah, and currently running the empire.
Oh,
Chamberlain doesn't mean running the empire, but that's what Seatorus is.
That's what he's doing.
Correct. Yeah. Another freedman called Marcus Aurelius Cleander had very high ambitions. And if I haven't mentioned, freedmen are former slaves.
Right.
There were legal means of becoming freed.
Yep.
And plenty of people rose quite high after becoming free. Also, Cleander despised Seatorus.
Oh, boy.
And so did many in the palace, including plenty of the imperial guards. While the palace was tense and highly emotional following the assassination attempt, Cleander began pointing his finger at Seatorus. This man is running the show so poorly that our dearly beloved Commodus was nearly killed. And for that matter, the guards who accompanied the emperor were also at risk for their lives because the people and Senate were fed up with Seodorus. He said loudly to the guards. Mm-hmm. It did not take long for a handful of these Praetorian guards to be persuaded to this line of thinking.
Okay, you're right.
Hey, yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
That sounds like the kind of thing I want to hear.
Yeah.
Seeing as they were already in the palace where Seodorus worked and lived, the guards were able to quickly apprehend him.
Nice.
To keep this nice and simple and avoid Quintianus blunder, Cleander did not waste time with words.
Oh, he just stabbed him.
He had him beheaded immediately.
Oh, good. That's a good way to do that.
Commodus was devastated when he found out about this. In the Historia Augusta, if the Historia Augusta can be trusted, and it cannot, the two were lovers as well as partners in government. And it is telling about how good Cleander was that he was able to talk Commodus down and explain that this was all just a misunderstanding. It had appeared Seodorus had been involved in the plot to kill you. We just needed to take care of that threat.
Yeah.
Cleander soon found himself in Seodorus' position as Chamberlain.
Nailed it.
There he is.
What'd you say?
Cleander.
Cleander.
Yep. It's exactly how it spells. Spell it exactly how it sounds.
That doesn't work for me. I'm just going to spell it the way I want to.
Yes, but it probably
very
is
bad at English.
Well, this is Latin, so
that makes it worse. It's not a good argument for me being able to spell things.
Probably not how you say it in like the Latin anyway. So, but he would not have nearly as much power as his predecessor. Not because Commodus intended to start ruling, but because another man was also making his play at this time.
Naturally.
Now, as was typical, there were two Praetorian prefects. We met Paternus already. The other man was called Perennis.
Perennis.
Ennis. Another distinguished military man under Marcus Aurelius. And he had ambition. Perennis gladly carried out the murder of Seodorus as it removed a major roadblock to power. Now, Cleander may have planned it.
Right.
But Perennis had the guards at his disposal. At least he kind of did.
Okay.
There was the issue of Paternus.
Yes.
Now, within weeks of the assassination attempt and Seodorus' death, Perennis began warning Commodus of a new threat.
Oh, no. It's a little bug in the ear about Paternus.
Well, this was another plot to overthrow the emperor.
Obviously.
It would have put some senator in charge or whatever. But what mattered is that, and the point that Perennis really drove home, is Paternus was clearly involved.
Right.
And Commodus went pale when he first heard this news. He knew the history of the empire well enough to know that the Praetorians had played kingmaker on several occasions. Now, Domitian was the last to suffer this fate, though most of the guard hadn't been involved. They actually kind of liked him. We barely talked about the Praetorians through Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
It's because they were very secure.
Yeah, they're just chilling, doing their job.
But now Commodus could see the shades of the past in his present situation. He wasn't a bright man.
Yeah, obviously.
But he had a strong sense of self-preservation.
Okay.
At least what he felt was self-preservation.
Yeah. Idiot.
Perennis got his desired outcome.
Oh, God.
Commodus called for the arrest and execution of Paternus, along with a handful of others involved in the plot. There may or may not have been a plot. May not have been. Now, Perennis stepped into the power vacuum. He was the sole controller of the Praetorians.
Oh, boy.
And Commodus was all too happy to hand Seodorus' previous duties over to this new man.
Yeah. Dude, this guy's like, listen, I don't care what happens. I just want to keep drinking, eating, and having no responsibility.
Just super happy that someone's taking control again.
That's
God,
right.
after Seodorus died, I was really worried.
I was really worried I might have to do something. Hate this guy.
As a side note about how the sources disagree with each other, I mentioned this earlier. In Herodian's version, Seodorus and Paternus aren't mentioned. And Perennis is just in charge from the get, as soon as he gets there. So you can see how it's very odd, because we know that these people existed.
Yeah, the plague
so
of
far
history,
as we can
man.
tell. Yeah, for real. So Seodorus appeared to have been a decent administrator, if not one that the elites would have preferred.
Right.
Perennis was an all-around different beast. His ambition and his greed were of the highest caliber.
Do you mean Chilander?
Cleander?
Cleander.
Nope, I'm talking about Perennis.
No, you said Serratius about being administrative.
He had been.
Isn't he dead now?
He is. He had been a decent administrator. And now Perennis, see, this is why I had you write names down, because there's a lot of names.
Cleander didn't take over.
No, he took over as Chamberlain,
Oh God.
which is a specific
Yeah,
role.
yeah.
Perennis now
But he
is truly running the
but
show.
he didn't take over.
Correct.
What Serratius was doing.
Yes, still a very powerful
Okay,
position Cleander is in.
okay.
But yes, so Perennis is in charge, and he is very ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
To secure his position after Paternus's death, he built upon Commodus's fears.
Mm-hmm.
The emperor was now very paranoid about people taking his power and ending his life. Perennis pointed out that those who had made attempts on his life were those rich, powerful senators.
Right.
Remember
Obviously.
the words the assassins had shouted at you?
Yeah.
How the Senate had sent him to murder you? Those damn senators. They just keep butting in. Like
Obviously.
those men your father left to advise you.
Oh boy.
Where did they get off telling the emperor what to do?
Yeah. How dare they advise as their role of advisors?
Well, obviously, Commodus saw the wisdom in these words. So when Perennis began bringing false charges against rich and powerful men, Commodus really saw no issue. Obviously, they were
He was
bad
like, yeah,
people.
yeah, for real.
And when Perennis started confiscating the properties of these men, it only seemed just.
Yeah.
And it
Makes
helped.
sense.
Perennis had the foresight to cut Commodus in on his ill-gotten gains.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Like, hey, listen, just because I care about you so much, I'm going to obviously give my emperor a part of this.
Yeah, why wouldn't I? I'm
Obviously.
doing this on his
You're
behalf. These men
entitled
are
to
bad.
it. Yeah.
So once again, Commodus settled into this new natural order. He spent most of his time out of Rome now, though, preferring his family estate not far from the capital. He was kind of fearful of the city, a fear that Perennis continued to stoke. Perennis spent the next couple of years, quote, running the empire.
Yeah. Makes sense.
This meant mass confiscation of property and a decent handful of executions. In short time, the lowly Praetorian was the wealthiest man in the empire, and yet his greed was not satiated. Through his usual guile, he convinced Commodus to appoint his son the leader of the Illyrian legions.
Making money moves.
I wasn't sure if you had something to say as you were swallowing water. This, despite the lad being a bit young and completely inexperienced.
Yeah, that's great. I love it.
Yeah. It was also around this time that the Dacians kicked up a fuss.
Let's go. Bring it back.
Let's start it all up again.
Bring it
We've only been
back.
doing this for a century now. We don't know much about this short war, but two important men were likely involved, and we might just want to start having you write names down just as notes for the future. We have to, because it's just so much.
You have the notes. So you write the script, and then you tell me all the history things.
Okay, then I need you to. You might remember these names, but
Okay.
these names are important. These two men were involved in the fighting: Clodius Albinus and Pescennius Niger.
Oh my.
Yes,
Is he from Egypt?
I'm not sure what they mean is white and black.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll talk about them later. Perennis, it was clear, sought more than just his position as administrator. He was aiming to begin his own dynasty. Sorry, I kind of skipped over the Dacians. We don't really know what happened.
Yeah,
Some fighting happened.
We beat them.
His
Or
son
Rome,
was
Rome
up
beat
there.
them. Yeah.
So while celebrating an annual festival, Commodus was watching some actors perform.
Mm-hmm.
During a break in the performance, a man ran up on stage.
Oh boy.
He carried a staff and dressed in the robes of a philosopher.
Okay.
Before anyone could stop him, he began to speak. Quote, Commodus, this is no time for you to be enjoying yourself by spending your time at theaters and festivals. The sword of Perennis hangs poised over your head. Unless you take precautions against this danger, which is not just threatening, but already here, you will be destroyed before you realize it. In quick order, the man explained that Perennis was amassing a fortune to bribe the army of which his son had just been given command.
Right. He's very much setting himself up.
Correct. What do you think happened next?
Well, obviously, a person told Commodus something that was going to threaten his life. So he was like, oh, you're right, 100%. Let's get him out of here.
Wait, get who out of here?
Perennis.
Oh, what an interesting take. No.
Oh, no, I just assumed that Commodus listened to anyone that told him anything that involved threatening his life or his relaxation. Because he seems very stupid.
I can't wait for later. Because remember what you just said.
Yeah.
You're close but flipped in this instance.
Okay.
So Perennis declared this man a madman and a liar.
Okay, yeah.
Though most could see the truth in the man's words, they dared not speak up.
Well, yeah, because Perennis has all the power and has
Right.
just been executing people already. So
Correct. Commodus allowed Perennis to arrest the man.
Yeah.
For speaking too openly to the emperor, he was burned alive.
That seems so logical and fair.
Yes.
Yeah.
things were getting dicey now. It seemed everyone in Rome could smell the plot, except Commodus, because he was barely in Rome. It appeared it would take an army marching on the capital to convince him that there was a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then an army
Yeah, I was
marched
like,
on
did
the
someone get an
capital.
army to march on the Capitol then?
What? I'm being misleading.
Oh,
this is
man.
not what you're imagining.
Yeah.
These soldiers were actually officers from Britain,
Ah.
here as a delegation with the hopes of speaking directly with the emperor,
Ah, yes.
which is a bit odd.
Sure is.
Sure, Commodus thought. It would seem some things had begun breaking down. The soldiers informed the emperor that back in Britain, a mutiny had occurred. The governor's harsh treatment had pushed them to revolt. And one said, and everyone kind of looked down at their feet, ashamed. We kind of sort of declared some guy named Priscus emperor.
Oh.
But one of the soldiers quickly stepped forward and clarified, like, Priscus said no. He said no, and then he just said, I'm your legate. I'm going to keep being your legate. Okay? So we
man.
didn't revolt, and we're really sorry. But that's not why they were here.
Okay.
These men had come with the aim of informing Commodus that the rumors were true.
About Perennis?
Perennis had been buying the loyalty of many legions, and it was clear he planned to supplant Commodus with his own son.
Right.
This revelation had occurred not long after the philosopher's warning. So
Right.
Commodus probably like, oh,
two in a row. Maybe there's something to this. I don't
Faced
know.
with hundreds of
Right.
seemingly loyal men claiming the same thing, Commodus was overcome by fear.
I bet.
The man who had saved him from the plotters was himself plotting to seize the imperial power.
Man, he definitely could not have been plotting from the beginning, though.
No. And
That
how could
doesn't
this have
make sense.
happened? And wait, who let 1,500 soldiers enter to address the emperor directly?
You know, you should probably just ask Perennis if it's true, and if he says no, you should believe him.
Well, that might have worked, except that in the corner stood Cleander, the man who had killed Seatorus
Right.
and claimed his position, here yet again to climb the ladder of corpses he had built. He had heard news of the unrest in Britain and called on the officers involved to bring their grievances directly to Commodus, because Perennis obviously controlled everything Commodus heard through letters. The group was kept quiet until the moment they had their meeting. Perennis knew nothing. In the dead of night, Cleander, ostensibly acting on Commodus's orders, sent men to the prefect's chambers. With no pomp and no ceremony, Perennis was beheaded along with his wife.
Wow, he really learned from that failed assassination attempt.
Cleander
Don't
doesn't mess
dawdle,
around.
All right? No dawdling.
Just
Take it off.
cut the head off. Don't tell him why. Hey.
Yeah. No, we're going to kill you anyways. You're just dead.
At the same time, riders were sent out with orders not to stop until they reached the Illyrian frontier.
Okay, to where his son is.
Correct. They must beat the news of Perennis's death. The men arrived at the camp of Perennis's son. They informed him that he was summoned to the capital to receive a promotion.
Nice.
As he was accustomed to being handed jobs for which he was not qualified.
Right.
And believing his father to be emperor in all but name, he headed back to Rome. Upon arrival, he was set upon by armed men who murdered him in the streets.
Could have just killed him on the way or something.
Could have.
Seems like a lot of logistical
Probably wanted to
struggle.
stay away from the soldiers.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Along with this bloodshed, many others were implicated and killed. Friends and family of Perennis were slaughtered, whether they were involved or not.
Well, we got to get it out of there.
Also, the governor of Britain, who had failed to put down the revolt, was nearly executed and was replaced by a man named Pertinax.
Okay. That name's familiar.
Sure is. Okay. Now that all that is settled,
Yes.
time to start taking things seriously, is what most people would have said in Commodus's shoes.
Commodus said, who is going to take over the responsibility that I don't want?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious.
Cleander.
The person who caused all the problems should
go.
probably take control.
No. He didn't cause the problems. He solved the problems.
solved them.
Did you get that?
Didn't you see all the dead people? He
solved the
fixed
problems.
the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
right. So now it was Cleander's turn
There you go.
to hold the reins of Imperium. And I hope you crossed out Perennis.
I did.
Good.
I sure did.
And by the way, it is the year 185 CE. This has all happened
been
in 5 years.
years. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So again, Seatorus, decent administrator. Perennis, maybe a fine administrator, but highly corrupt and power hungry.
Oh, yeah. He was like, I'm going to take this.
Let's see how Cleander does. As those with power will do, he solidified his position. Threats to his power were removed. A new pair of Praetorian prefects were assigned. They're not important.
Yeah. Okay.
There were two, as usual, to prevent anyone getting too powerful.
Right.
Now, Cleander's MO was not to confiscate wealth on trumped-up charges. Instead, his game was to get put in charge of all official positions in the government and then sell them to the highest bidder.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Everything from governorships to military commands to consulships were all for sale.
You just pay me enough. Yeah, I'll just put you in charge.
It's pay to win Roman style.
That's nice.
Unrest was popping up around the empire.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, corruption and mismanagement usually goes over very well.
Yeah, it definitely won't create any more class disparities.
Now, the general I mentioned earlier, Niger, put down a group of deserters from Gaul and Germania. Soon after, 2 legions from Britannia had to cross over to the mainland to put down a revolt in Brittany.
Oh, man.
So this next piece is either related to those 2 revolts or separate. Either way, we're going to go through this story, which is told primarily from the perspective of Herodian. A man named Maternus began gathering up criminals and deserters around Gaul. This roving band would harass villages and steal all the wealth they could. In the ensuing months, Maternus set his eyes on bigger and bigger prizes. Soon, the bandits were large enough in number and in wealth to pose a significant threat. They began attacking small cities, and once inside, they would free the prisoners, swelling their ranks, regardless of their crimes, and steal whatever they could. When Commodus was informed, he was outraged. He blamed the governors of the afflicted provinces for their inaction.
Duh.
These men, as it turns out, were Albinus, Niger, and Septimius Severus.
Okay.
Commodus, likely through Cleander, ordered his men be amassed and prepared to take out this group of outlaws. And it was done. The governors began gathering their forces to hunt down the criminals. But soon the raids ceased, and Maternus seemed to disappear. For a while, nothing was heard from the rebel. Rumors abounded that he was dead, or maybe he was hiding in the hills of Spain, biding his time to strike again. Whatever the case, Commodus was happy not to have to deal with it.
Right.
Especially at this time of year, for it was the time of the Festival of the Hilaria.
Yes,
which
no responsibility during party time.
Exactly, which is all the time.
Yeah, right.
So this celebration was a long one that lasted several days. It was during this festival that people could dress up as they pleased.
Nice.
They could portray any character and act however they wanted without consequence.
Okay.
Masquerades are fun like that.
What do you mean, however they wanted?
Well, the whole point was you could dress up as any of the gods, the emperors, anything, and just act a fool, whatever.
Okay.
That is acceptable during this
Gotcha.
festival.
But not like the Purge, where nothing's illegal for a couple
No.
days.
But everyone's wearing masks.
Perfect.
Which is
So
great. And that
that's-
gave Maternus a plan. He and some of his men had snuck into Italy and made their way to the
boy.
capital in large numbers.
Yeah.
They filtered in over a couple months. Once there, they managed to get their hands on the armor and uniforms of some praetorians.
Nice.
During the parades that took place during the festival, Maternus planned to fall in line with the real guards, and once an opportunity presented itself, cut Commodus down.
Good.
In the ensuing confusion, he and his men could wreak havoc on Rome.
Right.
And it would have worked too, if not for some jealous little bitch boys running off and warning Commodus and Cleander.
And their meddling dog.
Right. We don't know why these people were upset, but they betrayed the conspiracy.
Okay,
and told.
interesting.
The rebels were captured. Maternus was executed the day before the celebrations were set to begin. As Herodian puts it, the other conspirators, quote, received the punishments they deserved. And that's all he said.
This is brutal death.
I'm like, I don't know what that means, but it's probably not pleasant.
Yeah.
The people celebrated the safety of the emperor and had a great time. But Commodus was once again terrified. Here he was, just trying to get on with his life of sports and games and chariot races.
Exactly.
And people just kept trying to kill him.
I'm just chilling, guys.
It was unfair. After Pertinax had discovered yet another plot in 187, Commodus began spending almost all of his time away from Rome. This left Cleander as the sole man in charge almost all the time.
Right.
And he capitalized on this.
I bet.
In 188 CE, he created a new position in the Praetorian Guard, the dagger bearer. This position was the supreme leader of the guard, superior to both prefects.
Man, I'm so glad that the reason for 2 prefects is to keep supreme power away. So you just made a new position above them.
Well, of course, those prefects could do anything.
more
They need to be
power.
kept in line.
The dagger bearer.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Isn't that just wonderful?
Oh, God.
Cleander continued in his ways of selling public offices to enrich himself. By 190 CE, a person could hardly get any position in government without paying Cleander.
Right.
So naturally, some of the worst people for a position were buying their way in.
Yeah.
And of course, the most sought after position for those who do nothing but want clout is that of consulship. Now, I said Cleander was selling consulships. I also mentioned in the past that there are now usually 2 ordinary consuls.
Right.
They're named for the year. And then after 2-3 months, they resign. And then there's several suffect consuls that follow. 3-4 maybe at most.
It's a lot of money for Cleander.
Well, in the year 190, Cleander sold a few more.
How many?
I want you to, so like I said, usually 3 or 4.
Yeah.
How many?
14.
25.
Oh, man. I thought I might have overshot this dude.
Yeah.
This dude. He's still 25.
25 of the second most important
Oh, my
role.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Great.
good. That's good.
One of those men was Septimius Severus, who I mentioned earlier. Clearly, things were getting quite out of hand. The people were getting tired of this state of affairs. And then a famine struck the city. Rumors abounded that Cleander had bought up all the grain with his dirty money, thus creating an artificial shortage so he could make even more money. It is likely that this was a deliberate setup by the grain commissioner who wanted to see Cleander brought down, because a lot of people did.
Gotcha.
Whatever the case, people started starving. During a chariot race at the Circus Maximus, we hear a tale of a gaunt woman marching out onto the track. This scene was all the more shocking because the woman had with her a large group of starving children.
Ah.
The woman and children cried out against the crimes of Cleander. Soon, the massive crowd, which was upwards of 150,000 people, were pissed and started crying the same complaints. Cleander saw the writing on the walls and fled the circus.
He's like, all right, cool, I'm a bounce.
Hey, I'll see you guys later.
Peace.
Okay? A riot soon erupted as the enraged, starving mob sought Cleander's head. As mentioned, Commodus was almost never in the city. He was about 4 miles away in his villa. So when Cleander burst in, he was probably very sweaty and out of breath. Commodus obviously knew nothing about what was going on. Cleander told him the people were rioting due to the lack of grain, leaving out their desire for his blood.
Right. Mostly correct.
Right. Now, Cleander rounded up the Praetorians and had them march back to the city. Many were on horseback, and the soldiers were able to rout this disorderly mob that was pouring out of the gates. Hundreds were cut down or crushed by the tide of panicked people. Those who were still in the city were shocked at the carnage as the survivors emerged through the gates with the cavalry still hot on their heels. The guards were quite confident by this point. It wouldn't take long for a group of well-armed men to put down the rabble. However, once they arrived at the city, it became clear that the people would not be subdued easily. They couldn't move their horses through the narrow streets as well and had to dismount. And then people started throwing heavy tiles down from the rooftops.
Ow.
Word was sent to Pertinax. That was a weird way to say his name.
Yes, it was.
Word was sent to Pertinax, who was at this point the urban prefect. This guy Pertinax sure doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. The urban prefect, as we talked about before, was the only other man with a fighting force of any scale in the city because he had basically the police force. The Praetorians demanded he send his men out to assist against the rioters.
He was like, nah.
Well, they came out.
Yeah.
And the Praetorians were likely very shocked when the city watch rushed out and began a street fight with them.
Oh, good. Yes. Oh, we'll get in the street.
Oh, it will help.
Oh, we'll get there.
We will definitely help. The mob soon overcame the guards, and the Praetorians were forced to retreat out of the city. And the mob followed them.
Oh, wow.
They did not stop until they arrived at Commodus's villa. Once there, the people laid out their demands. They were simple. 1, let us kill Cleander.
Right.
2, also maybe some food, but really just the Cleander
thing.
We
want to kill Cleander, and we want to stop starving, but we really want to kill Cleander.
So, back to what you said earlier. What do you think Commodus did?
Take him.
In true Commodus fashion, he took the simplest route.
Yeah.
Now, Marcia is a woman. There's just so many names that we're just adding her now. She is his mistress, his favorite.
Okay.
Basically his wife, because his wife
right.
is off to the side. We'll talk about her in a minute. She encouraged him to give the mob what they wanted.
Yeah.
Oh, you're here to kill Cleander because you're upset with him. Yeah, go ahead, have fun.
Sure.
Take got it. And they did have fun.
Oh, no.
They murdered Cleander and his son. They put the freedman's head on a spike and headed back to Rome, where they paraded it through the streets.
Nice.
Others were implicated in Cleander's wrongdoing, and they too were executed. This was quite truly a bloody purge. Anyone close to Cleander could now be dragged from their homes and hacked to bits, either by imperial decree or because the mob didn't like them much. As the chaos subsided, Commodus started to see things clearly.
Did he, though?
He had been appointed to rule the greatest civilization in human history. His father was a god above and he was a god on earth. He must rule his people personally.
Oh, man. You know? Yeah. You're just going to be really bad at it still.
Yes. So, after Cleander's downfall, Commodus assumed a far more active role in his government. Marcia was right there at his side, along with the new chamberlain, Eclectus.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the new Praetorian prefect, Laetus, Laetus. As an aside, here we are talking about Commodus's wife, Crispina. She was exiled and executed at some point.
Okay. Yeah.
Herodian and Dio claim she was caught up in Lucilla's plot in 182. But there are inscriptions of her up to 191.
Okay.
So modern thinking is she was exiled for adultery in 188, probably on false charges, during Cleander's fall, which happened in 190. So like
just bundle it all together.
Right. Which makes sense since Commodus now had Marcia as pretty much wife in all but name. And Crispina had not given Commodus any children in their decade of marriage, which is obviously her fault.
Right.
Now that Commodus was in charge, he set about the important duties of his office.
I can't imagine.
Well, he went before the Senate and he told them that he needed some new statues. Now, there was likely a pause. Then he explained that his statues were all wrong. And they kind of, well, my emperor, what is wrong with them? Now, I mentioned a moment ago, and you kind of chuckled that Commodus was a god on earth.
Right.
And I was not joking. Commodus believed that he was, quite literally, Hercules.
Okay. All right, man. Go lift that pillar.
Well, what the thing is that these statues need to reflect this.
Oh, gotcha.
He's not Commodus, like he's Hercules.
Right.
It is likely the Senate were a bit shocked by this.
Yeah.
But what were they to do? Commodus has shown throughout his reign that he did not care what the Senate thought. He had shown open derision for them since that first assassination attempt. So, the statues were changed. They were to be depicted as Hercules was, with his lion pelt draped over his head and a massive club over his shoulder. Do you remember me mentioning why the Colosseum is called the Colosseum?
No.
Okay. So Nero, back in the day, had planned to, after the fire, build a golden house. And he built a massive statue of himself. A colossal statue.
Yes.
That statue had been moved in front of the Flavian Amphitheater, the Colosseum.
Oh, okay.
So the colossal statue, Colosseum.
Okay.
The statue had quickly been changed from Nero's face to the sun god's soul. Now it's got to be Hercules.
Right.
Commodus Hercules.
Naturally.
So we got to update that. And that statue is like 100 feet tall.
Yeah. Get to it.
So get to it. This was not really okay in the eyes of the Senate and the public. Emperors were deified after death.
Right.
There were no living gods walking amongst them. Nero had a similar problem. Yet, here they were, ruled by a 29-year-old who truly believed he was Hercules. And anything said to the contrary was as good as signing your own death warrant.
That's right. Blasphemy. Kill him.
I'm going to show you a bust of Commodus as Hercules. Okay?
Okay.
So that is what the man looked like. And listeners, I highly encourage you to look this up because it is quite impressive. He's a very athletic, prime of his life man wearing a lion's pelt with the mouth over his head. Beautiful beard. And don't get it twisted. He walked around like that.
That's right.
Carrying a club.
He is Hercules.
He is Hercules.
What don't you understand? Why wouldn't he walk around like that?
Exactly. And thank goodness he was Hercules. Because in 191 CE, a fire broke out in Rome.
Okay.
And it would be a Herculean effort to fix the damage it caused.
All right.
Yeah. Large sections of the city were destroyed, including many temples and part of the palace.
Oh, no.
Yeah, this is horrible for the populace. And Commodus saw it as the perfect opportunity. He set about clearing out the damaged buildings and setting up new building projects. In fact, he thought Let's scrap the whole city. Start fresh. He declared that he was Romulus and refounded the city, this time with a much better name.
What?
Colonia Commodiana, the city of Commodus.
He just said, nah, listen, let's just restart the city of Rome.
Not let's.
Oh, you're right.
am
That's
restarting
right. This
the
is what's
city.
happening.
I, Romulus Hercules Commodus.
Yeah, that's normal.
Speaking of all the names, while he was at it, he changed the names of all the months. As it happened, he had about 12 names by this point.
Perfect.
So I'm just gonna read these to you. The months were now Amazonius, which is a reference to Hercules, Invictus, Felix, Pius, Lucius, Aelius, Aurelius, Commodus, Augustus, Herculeus, Romanus, Exuperetorius, the Supreme, which is meant for Jupiter, the father of Hercules, which would be Zeus in the Greek version.
Yeah.
But yeah. Next, he renamed the legions to style them after himself.
Oh, my God.
And then the fleets.
This man's insane.
Yeah. While doing all of this, Commodus did something that truly and utterly shocked the people. He sent out word across the land that he, Emperor Hercules Commodus, would be participating in the games.
Yes, please.
To quote Herodian, he promised he would kill all the wild animals with his own hand and engage in gladiatorial combat with the stoutest of the young men.
God, I hope so. I hope so.
The people were astounded.
Yeah.
When they arrived at the Colosseum, they witnessed their emperor firing a bow like a true master. Animals of all kinds were brought from around the known world, and Commodus brought them all down. By all accounts, he was one of the best shots of his age.
Wild.
Yes.
Are you sure it wasn't just a master archer with a lion pelt on instead?
Nope. This was Commodus. But more shockingly, the emperor was going to fight in the arena as a gladiator. Now, that's bad. Real bad. Because gladiators are the lowest form of people.
Yes.
They are slaves.
Yeah. No, yes. You are condemned to essentially death.
Yeah.
But just to entertain us until you die.
Like gladiators were treated like athletes. And
Yeah.
pampered and everything, but that was just so they could keep performing.
Yeah.
They were still slaves
Right.
and still like looked down upon by the common people. Commodus, as we discussed, loved gladiatorial combat. He loved it so much that throughout his reign, which we haven't talked much about him throughout his reign, he had been training in gladiatorial arms.
Makes sense.
For most of that time, he had been away from Rome. In his private villa, he was free to host private contests where he could drive a chariot, another thing that slaves did, and fight with gladiatorial arms. And he was very good. Wiser heads had prevailed for many years. The people would not look kindly on the emperor fighting as a gladiator, and it cannot be understated how taboo this would have been. Now, I thought of something that would have been maybe similar. Imagine right now we have a President Joe Biden getting on a live stream and doing a sexual cam show once or twice a month
Hot.
while in office.
Hot.
It would be so shocking.
You would, yeah.
You wouldn't even, modern day, you wouldn't believe it was really happening.
Yeah,
You'd be
no, I'd be
that's
like,
fake.
all right, well, that's just fake.
That's
Someone
just
just
fake.
yeah,
But
just
it's really
your
Joe.
face on him. That is wild, yeah.
Yeah.
Just like yeah.
But Commodus was Hercules, son of Jupiter, gladiator, emperor. He put
Right.
on games almost constantly
Time
from
to
this
fight.
point on. Yeah. Also he could kill animals and fight men, sometimes to the death. Unlike the expectation of the leading class, the plebs actually really liked this at first. I can't imagine being like, wow, the emperor, the godlike being that we can never possibly know or understand, is
Right.
fighting in the arena.
Yeah, especially if he's legitimately talented
Right.
at it.
And he was good.
Yeah.
He was very good. And we'll
Yeah.
discuss more of that later. Let's just say for now that Commodus continued playing the gladiator god emperor through 192 CE. He changed the names of the months and refounded Rome in his image. Commodus was on a roll with what could easily be considered treason trials, just without the trial part.
Right.
Just a lot of executions, some by Commodus's own hand, which was making powerful people very angry and very fearful. Something needed to be done. Then, in late 192, Commodus died.
Oh.
And we will go into much further detail during departing demise. For now, what do you think?
Wild.
it gets wilder.
Just like it's just like, here's history. This is Rome. Yeah, there's some good emperors, some bad emperors, but it's things going on. What happened here?
What? We're in Golden Age?
And now we're back to, okay.
All right.
Yeah. It's like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Mastery of military might.
Commodus was schooled in the art of warfare from a very young age. We have records of him being on the front with his father when he was around 11. Mm-hmm. And then he stayed there throughout much of the Marcomannic Wars.
Right.
As he aged, it is likely he partook in some of the fighting from a very safe distance, obviously. He also had a very high degree of personal combat skill. He was an expert marksman with a bow. His spear and javelin work was very good. And he was apparently a very competent hand-to-hand fighter with a variety of weapons. Obviously, the gladiators were taking it easy on him for fear of injuring the emperor, but he was still skilled enough to be in there. As mentioned, war broke out in Dacia once again. Very little is known about it, which might mean it was a quick victory for the Romans. Not sure, but, a little war and it was won. In 184 CE, the governor of Britain decided once again to push past Hadrian's Wall and reoccupy the Antonine Wall that Antoninus Pius had set up. This went poorly.
Yeah.
The strict discipline of this campaign is what led the troops in Britain to revolt and declare Priscus emperor. That didn't become an uprising because Priscus refused.
He's like, no.
But the governor was nearly executed for the mishandling of things. And that's about it.
That's about it. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I don't know that it's a 0. And it depends, too, mastery of military might. Does the personal understanding of weaponry and, combat arms, do you get points for that? I'm not sure. We haven't really dealt with this.
Yeah. I was thinking somewhere around a 2.
I was also thinking 1 or 2.
Just because I give him a little bit for being personally skilled, but only because he privately wanted to train for his own benefit and was extremely uninvolved with everything else.
Right. Yeah, that is true. Okay, so you're gonna give him a 2?
A 2. Yeah.
Okay. A 3 total. Yeah, I think a 3 total is fair. So that is a 3 overall for mastery of military might. Starting off strong, Commodus.
But I think going to get better.
I think the next round is his round.
Definitely.
Terrible tyranny.
Here we go.
So I don't usually start with the worst thing about them, but I think today I will. He was left-handed.
Oh, God. That's an 11 right there.
Yeah.
Terrible tyranny, 11.
This was actually pretty negative back then. And he was very proud of it.
Yeah.
He had inscriptions about being the best left-handed swordsman in the world. As a fellow southpaw who likes combat sports, I appreciate the benefit of being a lefty in a fight. So, just thought I'd throw that in there. Now, a quote from Dio, which I think sums things up in an interesting way. Commodus was not naturally wicked, but, on the contrary, as guileless as any man that ever lived. His great simplicity, however, together with his cowardice, made him the slave of his companions, and it was through them that he at first, out of ignorance, missed the better life, and then was led on into the lustful and cruel habits, which soon became second nature. So, spoiled kid with not a lot of direction, not the most brains, gets said, hey, sex, drugs, and alcohol. How about that instead of ruling and work?
Yeah, it's boring being in charge.
And then fell into that, saw lots of violence throughout his life, and so that's what he did.
Yeah, I can't imagine that he had a lot of childhood trauma just with the state of the world and the position he was in.
You say you can imagine or can't?
Yeah,
okay,
I can imagine.
I was like, you can't? I can.
Yeah, he grew up in a living hell.
Yeah.
I imagine it changed his psyche from a very early age.
100%. Well, let's look at a few things that he did. Thrice, he left the empire in the hands of men who, at best, weren't that great at running the show, and at worst, were some of the most corrupt people in the history of the empire.
Yeah.
Now, after the downfall of each powerful man, purges of various sizes occurred. These were carried out by those around Commodus, but often with his full consent and approval. Now, after Cleander's execution and his own assumption of power, there was a great deal of killing. I mentioned a grain commissioner likely set Cleander up for the food shortage. That commissioner was executed, as was one of the new Praetorian prefects who wasn't named. This was only a few days into taking the job. His aunt and brother-in-law were also somehow involved in some conspiracy. They were executed. And I wasn't kidding. People, families, friends, acquaintances.
Yeah.
If you knew certain people, you were killed in a lot of these purges. Things finally started settling down as Marcia and Eclectus, the new chamberlain, were able to assuage Commodus's fears and paranoia. There was, at last, a team working close to Commodus who sought to improve the realm rather than leech upon it.
Yeah, God, finally.
But it was
It
now
didn't work very well.
that Commodus began drinking his own Kool-Aid.
Nice.
And his mental
I
state
am
quickly
Hercules.
broke down.
Yeah.
It would seem, as we discussed, a childhood surrounded by war, disease, and famine does a lot to the psyche. And it doesn't help when the traumatized child then becomes the world's most powerful teenager.
Yeah.
And then people spend a decade trying to kill him. He dove headlong into his delusions and declared that he was Hercules. He renamed Rome and a bunch of other things to reflect his own name. Now, the games. We're going to go into a bit of detail on the games that he held in these final couple years of his reign. He began calling for so many games and races, sometimes literally only hours before, saying, hey, everyone, we're going to run 30 laps. You got 2 hours. Get everything ready.
Get prepared.
Get the horses, get the chariots, get the people. Everyone needs to be in the arena. And when I say everyone, I mean he wanted everyone there. If there was games going on, you weren't working. You were at the arena.
All the people.
So work ground to a halt. Because for months, we were doing this all the time. To offset this, Commodus just handed out money to people.
Yeah.
Walking around with his club and his
that's how
line pelt.
infrastructure works. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't need to work if I can pay them to come to all the games.
Nothing needs to get done.
Plus, people love the games.
Yeah.
I, Commodus Hercules, am a benevolent god.
Of course.
Now, wild animals were brought from all places known to the empire for these shows. Here are a couple quotes from Herodian about these games. He shot down deer and gazelles and other horned animals by pursuing them as they ran and stopping them dead in their tracks with a well-timed shot, just as they made a dash for it. The lions and leopards and other fine animals of this kind he speared from above. One never saw him take a second shot, and it was always a fatal wound. On one occasion, he used some arrows with crescent-shaped heads to shoot at Mauritanian ostriches,
Brutal.
birds that can move tremendously quickly. So yeah, a spear with like a horseshoe-shaped double prong
Yep.
so that it could slice right through an ostrich's head. Commodus decapitated the birds at the top of their necks with his arrows so that they went on running around as though they had not been touched, even when their heads had been cut off by the sweep of the arrow.
Nice.
So he was a very good
Yeah.
shot, and he did this with hundreds of animals. If you haven't figured out yet, the man who threw the javelin in our intro
Right.
was Commodus. While this was terrible for the condemned man and the leopard, it must have been pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, I bet.
And now, as I, don't really like this source, I just wanted to let you know that I compiled a list of things specifically from the Historia Augusta. They weren't there when Commodus was alive. Dio and Herodian were. So, yeah, take this all with a lot of salt. Some of these are quotes and some of these are just me paraphrasing. So, quote, women of particular beauty of appearance he gathered together like bought harlots, creating a brothel to make sport of their chastity. The assumption is that he was actually kidnapping people and hey, you're hot.
Yeah, you
Get in there.
gotta
Get to
be
the
in
palace.
this little palace area here now.
Yep.
You're gonna be the room of hot women.
Yep, you need to be not just women. Children, men.
Oh, just anyone.
Yep.
You're a beautiful
This mentions
human.
women, but remember he was also probably bisexual.
Right.
He openly kissed Seodorus in public. He may have banged some of his remaining sisters.
Okay.
He pretended that he was going, or this is a quote actually, he pretended that he was going to go to Africa too, so that he could exact traveling expenses from the Senate. And he did exact them and spent them on banquets and gambling instead. Said, hey, I need to make an imperial trip to Africa. I need the money for it. All right, cool, here it is. Great. I'm going to go gamble and have feasts.
Thanks, fam.
Yep. He killed one of his prefects with poisonous frogs.
Oh.
Yeah. A man read a book about Caligula
How dare you?
and was, quote, cast to the beasts because Commodus shared a birthday with Caligula. So, You got to kill that guy. Yeah.
Definitely.
He mixed human feces into fine cuisine, then would eat some of it to keep up appearances, and then mock people for having eaten the poo unwittingly.
Oh, God.
Yeah. He pushed one of his prefects into a pool and then made him dance naked in front of the concubines.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. The list honestly goes on and on. As the author of the Historia Augusta did not live in the time, like I said, we can assume a lot of this is probably made up. Still, he was clearly pretty crazy.
Yeah,
he had
I don't
no
know.
qualms about ordering executions and killing people personally.
And none of it really seems that far out there for him.
Right. Even the more subdued accounts are like, wow, you are nuts, bro. So I think it's pretty easy 10. Dude's crazy. Dude, and just horribly tyrannical. And then the people he put in charge were some of the worst who did horribly tyrannical things. All those purges were because Commodus put people in charge that he shouldn't have.
Right. But is being a bad delegator really tyranny?
It is when you have the authority to stop it, but you go, I'd rather not.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't want to be involved in anything.
Yeah. Which also is a form of being terrible as a ruler.
That's true.
Yeah. I'm giving him a 10.
Yeah, I'll give him a 10.
Yeah.
For sure.
The only perfect score we've had since Caligula.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because he was just straight up bonkers.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, even after he was just insanely irresponsible, he just went bonkers and was like, I'm going to do whatever I want.
I'm going to just do what sounds right to me and
God.
kill everyone
Obviously.
else. Well, yeah, because I am the son of Jupiter.
I am Hercules.
Not Marcus Aurelius.
No. I
'Cause that guy
am
sucks.
Hercules.
Right.
He had to have like just a number of psychotic breaks in his life.
Yeah. He must have just been very much on the edge.
Yeah.
And then finally, like the last thing with Cleander, he went, no, I think it'd be a lot more fun to be a god.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So that is a perfect 20 for terrible tyranny. On to the next.
Lives of the living.
Terrible. There's got to be terrible.
Yeah, it must be. So, quote again from Herodian, a short one. So far, Commodus was still quite popular with the mob, even if his conduct, apart from his courage and marksmanship, was unfitting for an emperor. This, of course, referencing how the people, once Commodus actually came out and was like, I'm going to rule, they were like, oh, and you're going to be in the arena?
Yeah.
That's awesome for a little bit. And then it was like, oh, you're just crazy.
Yeah,
you're
like,
not
you
ruling.
really like just
You're
killing
just
things.
insane.
Okay.
So, I didn't really have any pros. That was my pros section. So I'm going to just read the cons here quick. His lack of attention to government allowed a slew of men to run corrupt administrations. Each man was worse than the one who had come before, culminating in 5 years of Cleander selling everything, including the kitchen sink. This does terrible things to a state, and the people likely felt the ramifications for years to come. When that massive fire hit Rome, he sought to capitalize on the situation rather than help his people,
Right.
though he likely did help too. And
Well, he
was
wanted to rebuild
built-
his new city.
Right.
Yeah.
It was for him.
Yeah.
Correct.
Oh, 100%.
His insanity near the end led to his assassination and further crisis, which we'll cover next time. For the first time in living memory, an emperor's actions had been a net negative for the people.
Yeah.
It is arguable that living under Marcus might have been worse for the people, but through no fault of Marcus's.
Yeah. It was all him trying to fix it all.
Right. He did everything possible. But now Commodus was in like a relatively very good position, and just 12 years, he ruined it all. The empire was in great debt. The people had formed a mob and violently removed several people and their families from power and
Famine.
life. Yes, a famine. All of this stuff happening with the emperor's approval and participation. The emperor was playing as a gladiator and a charioteer, both positions historically held by slaves. And attempts on the emperor's life were so frequent, and they resulted in so much bloodshed.
Yes.
Lots of people died every time
Always.
someone had a power play in the palace. And all of this can be laid at the feet of Commodus because he had the ability to stop it and did not. So, what do we do here? What is a 0?
I don't know if anyone can be a 0. It's real hard.
Unless
well, not yet. Not until like the fall.
Well,
This is a real setback. That's for sure.
this is the beginning of the fall.
Yeah.
This is considered by most to be the beginning of the very slow decline of the
Makes
Roman
sense.
Empire. I agree, because we could do it in terms of, comparison, because compared to the last 80 years of the Golden Age, this is the worst. No one alive in the Empire has dealt with this much problems.
Right.
I don't know what a 0 is, but there has to be a 0, otherwise there's no point. I don't think a 0. I think maybe like a 2.
You think a 2? If you go 2, I'm gonna go 1.
I can accept that.
Yeah.
I mean, 3, because it's
like comparatively, like you said, right? The people's lives maybe just by circumstance of the world could have potentially been on average a little worse for wear during Marcus, but I'm sure they had positive spirit because they had an emperor they trusted and saw the effort being made to still try to save the situation.
Mm-hmm.
This was just
chaos.
Like nothing, no hope.
Yeah.
This man's crazy. So many people are dying. I don't know how to do anything to make my life not terrible.
And it doesn't seem like they really realized it. They had this idea of the emperor as this benevolent being, and
Right.
all the problems up until he took over were everyone else's fault.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he took over, and they were like, "Oh, this is cool." Oh,
And then we're like, oh, wait, no, dang. It was all his fault.
It
'Cause
was
he's terrible and
definitely-
crazy. Okay.
partially
Yeah.
on him, huh?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to go with a 1.
All right, so that is a 3 for Lives of the Living. Not doing great, Commodus.
Departing demise.
All right, so let's talk about how he died. Commodus had wrapped up some of his biggest games yet. He had slaughtered hundreds of animals in
Right.
celebration of how awesome he was, and set about planning the new great conquest of helpless creatures. The plan was to host another large set of games on the first day of 193 CE to
boy.
celebrate the refounding of Rome. Mm-hmm. Not only that, he also planned to enter the arena from the gladiator's chambers
Oh, boy.
rather than from the palace. He informed Marcia of this plan. She, like most others, was horrified
She's like,
at that
"No."
prospect. Again, this would be the taboo of all taboos for an
Okay,
emperor.
you're making it worse somehow. I didn't know you could, but this is worse.
Stop. Honey, please. But Eclectus and Latus were then summoned. He hoped that they would approve.
Right.
He needed them to make the arrangements for him to sleep in the barracks with the gladiators.
Oh, my God.
Both men tried to dissuade their emperor, and this infuriated Commodus, who stormed out of the meeting.
What a spoiled brat still.
Shortly after this, Marcia found a list of people to be executed in Commodus's chamber. Herodian says the note was found by a young boy who apparently was dressed in gold and jewels and nothing else, which apparently was a common thing for aristocrats. You just had young,
Interesting.
naked boys running around. I don't know. I didn't want to look into that.
Nope.
But it was there. Anyway, so the list would likely not have been anything new for
Right,
Marcia.
yeah.
Death warrants were always.
But some names were due.
She noticed a name at the top of the list
Hey.
that made her breath catch in her chest.
What was it her own name?
Marcia.
That's unfortunate.
Followed by
The
Eclectus
other two, yeah.
and Latus.
Yeah. Obviously. They disagreed with something they wanted to do that was reckless. Of course they need to die.
Right. Now, the list went on. It contained virtually everyone who dared question Commodus at this time, mostly the men left from his father's regime.
My God.
As Herodian puts it, quote, Commodus's intention was to be rid of all the remaining senior advisors of his father, since he felt embarrassed at having respectable witnesses to his degenerate behavior. Yeah.
Wow. So he knew. She was like, knew what he was doing was wild.
Yeah.
But he's like, I can't have responsible people see it. They just need to die instead.
How about they just die?
That's better.
So Marcia rushed from the chambers and sought out Latus and Eclectus.
Yeah.
It was clear the madman meant to put on a spectacle with their executions, along with the deaths of both consuls, so that Commodus could emerge as gladiator consul.
What does that even mean?
Now, see, yeah, so my next line is very bizarre. Even the translator was like, huh?
Yeah.
There's just a section where it just says ... with a number
Oh,
so that
yeah.
you can read. And he's like, I think this is what he's saying. It
I
just
don't know,
doesn't
man.
really make sense.
Correct.
But yeah, so they needed a plan to remove Commodus quickly. The first major issue was the Praetorian Guards. As Commodus was a fun-loving, athletic man who gave money to the guard and army liberally, they were unlikely to cooperate with the coup attempt. This was where Latus would come in. As prefect, he would be able to keep those guards who could be bought or convinced close to Commodus
Yeah.
and the rest away. The saying goes that poison is a woman's weapon.
yeah.
And so it was Marcia's weapon. If you believe Dio, she applied the poison to Commodus's meat that night, and if you believe Herodian, she mixed him a strong wine with enough fragrance to mask the smell of the poison. Yeah, why not both?
Yeah.
Well, Commodus wolfed down whatever it was.
Yeah.
He was a bit of a glutton for food, and especially for drink.
We trained all the time, man. You need them
Very
calories.
hungry. Gotta keep your
Calories in,
strength up.
calories out.
Absolutely. Soon after, the emperor fell very ill. Marcia and Eclectus kept close to their liege as he lay in his chambers. What?
I said, "Oh no!
Oh no!
He's sick.
Are you sick?
Are you feeling bad? Oh,
let me just sit next to you, honey.
yeah."
He flitted in and out of consciousness for some time. Fear gripped the group. It was imperative that Commodus die during the late hours of the night. Latus would currently be running around the city banging on doors. They needed a replacement emperor.
Just like, hey, listen, do you want to be emperor? Hey, how about you? How you feeling?
Hey, you trying to be emperor tonight?
Yeah.
Then Commodus woke from his stupor.
Come on, man. You should have been feeding him more poison. Like, hey, drink this. It'll make you feel better.
Yeah. Well, what followed was a very prolonged bout of vomiting. The conspirators watched on in horror as the emperor expelled everything from his gut.
I bet.
Had he expunged the poison along with his food and drink? Was there still enough in him to finish the job? After this very violent episode of vomiting, which lasted an unpleasant amount of time, Commodus announced that he would require another bath. He was known to take upwards of 8 baths a day.
Oh, my God.
Yep. So the ailing man limped off to his private baths.
Well, I mean, someone could just push the head under, you know.
He's such a strong guy, though.
He's weak. He's weak right now.
He is weakened. Well, Latus had returned by this point and informed the group that the replacement had been arranged.
Nice.
He was shocked to learn that Commodus had gotten up and left on his own 2 feet.
He's like, what?
Clearly, something further needed to be done. So Latus set off once again, a new plan rapidly forming in his mind.
Right.
Commodus likely felt terrible.
Yeah, dude. Dude's been vomiting for hours.
Yeah. The usual comfort the steamy baths brought were almost annoying, with his stomach convulsing and his fever peaking.
Yeah, I was going to say it probably just caused more nausea and dehydration and made you feel terrible.
Yeah, he was just considering getting out when he heard footsteps behind him. He didn't turn to see who it was, obviously. Probably some attendant to ensure he did not lack for anything.
Naturally.
Or to make sure his bath was hot enough.
Correct.
Because we wouldn't want
Don't
that
wanna go to the
mistake
furnace.
again.
That's right.
Very suddenly, a muscled arm was around Commodus's neck.
There you go.
Despite his weakened state, he was an athletic fighting man and so struggled with all his might to get free. The emperor and his assailant fell into the warm waters and the struggle continued. It was no good, however. The man squeezed Commodus's neck so tightly that the emperor couldn't have drowned even if he had tried to inhale the water.
Nice.
After several minutes of holding Commodus under the water, the man let him float face down in the bath.
There you go.
Had Commodus seen him before his death, he would have recognized him as Narcissus, one of his wrestling partners. Latus and several of the senators who had been condemned had convinced Narcissus to undertake this plot very quickly, likely with the promise of amnesty and a nice sum of money.
Right. And he was like, oh, yeah, that guy's kind of an asshole. Yeah, I'll kill him.
Yeah. So Commodus was poisoned and then strangled to death on December 31st, 192 CE.
Nice.
He was 31 years old and had ruled by himself for over 12 years.
Oh, my God.
We will see how the rest of this plot unfolded in the next episode. But what do you think? I find that one quite interesting.
What a trip.
Yeah, that was...
It is just like a little, it's like, where are we?
Yeah,
what is going on?
Weren't we in the golden age?
I'm so confused. Is it Rome? What year is it? What is
are we
happening?
doing? Yeah. But departing demise.
My God.
I think it's a 10, honestly.
I think it's a 10.
It's as cool as the assassination of Caesar, in my opinion, which we gave perfect 10s.
That's fair. I mean, he did just
Double
get out of
assassination
bed while he was poisoned.
Yeah.
And was like, yeah, I need a bath, actually. Pretty gross.
Maybe it was just the crazy. The crazy in him was like, I can't die.
Maybe.
The poison is scared of me.
I mean that, and on top of just being in probably in very, very good shape.
Yeah.
Being extremely healthy just helped him prolong his death.
Very likely.
Yeah, I'll go with a 10.
Yeah. All right. So he will get some points. So that is another perfect score. So the only other perfect score we have is Caesar. We have 2 19s in this section.
Yeah.
Very well done.
Lasting legacy.
Oh man. This could be potentially a high score.
It could.
But just for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. Legacy isn't good.
Right. It's just
All right.
Are you remembered?
Well, so, as I mentioned at the beginning, Commodus was the only emperor to this point born in the purple. Mm-hmm. This would remain true for another 150 years.
Well, it didn't work out this time. So,
Right. Yeah.
you know.
So, sorry, spoilers. But,
Spoilers.
yeah, it doesn't go well. And a large portion of the population today knows of Commodus as portrayed by Joaquin Phoenix in the 2000 film Gladiator starring Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
So a very, very popular movie. If there's a name of a later Roman emperor people know, it's Marcus Aurelius and Commodus. Mm-hmm. So there you go. That version is really interesting and frightening in its own way. But I think they really missed a chance on making a truly terrifying and vicious person who's also very pitiful and pathetic.
Right.
Because Commodus was that. Maybe if they had taken Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker and put him as Commodus, it would have been a little bit closer. Yeah. Bear in mind, Commodus had inherited a battered but still very strong empire. Mm-hmm. His father had capitalized on 60 years of good management to hold it all together for another 2 decades. By Commodus's reign, things were shaky, but at the strongest they'd been in a while. Commodus's actions and his inactions can be directly tied to the end of what most historians consider the Golden Age of Rome. From Trajan through Marcus Aurelius, there was no better time to live in the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Despite the setbacks Marcus faced, he left Commodus a stable, if depleted, empire, and he had lost it all.
Oh, yeah.
This was also the end of the Pax Romana. 200 years of internal peace since Augustus ended the previous centuries of civil war. Spoilers, there's a good bit of civil war in our near future.
Man, I can't imagine why. Everything's going so well. Everyone likes each other so much right now.
Now, all of this stuff, including, the downfall of the Pax Romana, the end of the Golden Age, the decline of the empire, can be laid at Commodus's feet.
Yeah.
And he is still known today, though portrayed in a fictional version. I don't know, man. That's a really big impact.
Lasting legacy.
A very
you
long...
ended Rome. Good.
And he's the gladiator emperor.
That's true.
He's the crazy man who fought as a gladiator in the arena.
Really well, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't just a show.
It wasn't. It was a crazy show if it was anything.
Yeah, it wasn't like for show. He was actually a very good fighter.
Correct. I don't want to give 10s willy-nilly, but man, it's a lot of legacy.
I'm going to give him a 9.
Okay. Should I give him a 9 too, just to spite him?
I don't know. Just to spite this madman.
We've had very high scores in legacy. I suppose that's because I've picked the most
you are
people.
intentionally picking the ones that stuff has happened.
Yeah, I'll go with a 9. So we'll both give him a 9. So that's an 18 for the lasting legacy.
My God.
I think it's a bit less impressive of a legacy than Marcus's.
Oh, I mean, the legacy is very, very unimpressive, but like really strong in a negative way. Yeah.
Wow. He did not do well.
I know he didn't do well.
So with lasting legacy 18, what do you think his final score is? And I will tell you right now, the range is 85.5 is our best.
Yep.
And 53 is our worst, and that's Nero.
I'm doing the math real quick. I can't remember.
Don't do the math.
The last score.
What do you think you got?
This man got a 39.
What? No.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
He got several perfect scores.
That's the other one I missed. Okay.
Yeah.
49.
He had a 56.
Ugh.
Just beat Nero by 3. And he lost to Caligula somehow by 11. Which is interesting. Oh, probably Lives of the Living, because under Caligula, it was really just the rich people that he was just being a dick to.
Yeah.
All right. Well, not a great score, but we have a couple questions.
Oh man, no. No.
Shh. We gotta wait. We gotta roll the music. We gotta roll the thing.
Okay.
The Great?
All right. So does he deserve?
Was it not long enough?
So he's not the great.
No.
Easy enough. Okay. So then the last thing we need to discuss are his epithets. So I actually have a few this time. So the easy one, Commodus the Gladiator, pretty straightforward.
Boring.
I also have 2 related to his godhood, the false god or the unholy god.
Okay.
Commodus the Craven, Commodus the coward, the corrupt, or the degenerate?
Let's say delusional.
The delusional, the
Yeah.
deluded,
There you go.
the deluded.
This man's crazy.
Yeah.
This man,
Commodus the deluded.
this man's mind got warped and just was like, yes, no, I am a god.
He's not well.
Yeah. Really, really unfortunate.
The cowardly lion.
The cowardly lion. I do like delusional.
Commodus the delusional. Yeah.
'Cause this man is just crazy.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
And he was delusional about the people that were running the show for
100%.
him.
Yeah. He was like, oh no, they're doing a great job. They got it.
They got it.
I'm going to chill.
All right. Well, Commodus the delusional. Will you let me just type in here? Thank you. All right. Well, Commodus, what an interesting but terrible ruler.
It really did seem like, oh, Rome was just transported back in time to when everything was terrible.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Well, we had 3 yeses in a row for the great, and probably would have also had Antoninus Pius if we had taken the time to do a boring episode on him. But now we have Commodus as a no, and
Very confident no.
I don't want to spoil things, but it might be a while.
Well, as being attributed to most likely the start of the fall, I don't see it getting better.
Oh, but we have some interesting ones coming.
I'm sure there's some people that tried
Oh yeah,
to make
plenty.
it better, and it's too far gone. The boulder's already rolling, man.
It's rolling real fast.
Hard to stop.
Yep. But some people will try, and we will cover them. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We had to kind of cram this one in on a Tuesday. I wanted to probably record Wednesday or Thursday, but we are both just jam-packed.
That's right. Real busy for the next couple weeks.
I've actually been tracking my time on the work on these things. Yesterday I worked for 3.5 hours on this, and today, including the recording here, I'm at 5 hours and 15 minutes of it. So you're welcome, people
All
who want a
for you.
regularly scheduled podcast. The people. All right, bye.